Hello everyone, welcome back to our AI Tech Talk Live by Skive, I think. Today we'll be talking about structuring teams in a startup. This is a background. This is a live talk that we held every Wednesday where we talk about interesting topics in artificial intelligence, AI startups, and technology related to AI. And today we will switch gears. For the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about artificial intelligence itself. We talked about reinforcement learning. We talked about deep learning. We talked about superintelligence. Today, we are going back. We are talking about how to have a successful AI startups and specifically about structuring teams in a deep tech AI startup. We have three questions that we'll cover. If you have more questions, you are welcome to reach out to us via email, which is there in the invitation, or through Clubhouse. The first question is, why will structure of a team in an AI startup be any different from any other startup? I will contest it should not, although there's a difference. So when you're talking about an artificial intelligence startup where you have a deep technology, which is a differentiator, your focus is a lot more on the technology itself, building the technology, building a prototype, or making the new version of the technology as opposed to plain marketing. So there'll be some differences. In my opinion, for AI startup or any startup which is building something interesting, I believe we need to have one profit and loss, or the whole company should be in one P&L, which means that there will be one marketing team, there will be one software team, or there will be one AI team, or there will be one operations team, as opposed to every product or every feature having its own product manager, having its own sales, or having its own marketing team. And that's what I mean by functional teams. There are a couple of reasons why you want to have that, but before, let me give you a little bit of background. So I would suggest that in a startup, specifically if you are running an AI startup, you want to have some of these different functions and have one team for each function. Hardware could be one team, software aspects could be one team, services could be one team, sales is one team, design would be another team. And this spans the whole company as opposed to just one product manager or program manager or one project manager for one specific feature. This is a little bit unconventional because now everyone will be fighting for the same sales resource or the same marketing resource. The design is also centralized, but that is the whole idea, that you have these level of separation where everyone goes into depth into what they're doing. So the software team will focus really on the software piece of it and making it as best as possible. And same is for the sales. They will focus on selling the product or the products for the whole company, not just on one division of that. This ensures that there's a little bit of a hustle going on between different teams. So a software product or a feature in a specific team, they will still need to fight for those marketing resources, and that's a good thing. The second great aspect of this is that this is something that could scale. You will not need to change the structure as you go from, let's say, 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people. Now, going back to our question about why will structure of a team in an AI startup be any different from the other startup? The first aspect is that obviously, if you're an AI startup, you are at least trying to build something very critical, something that's differentiated, and for that you need to go in depth. In situations like these, it makes a lot of sense to have a team that's focused on only artificial intelligence, who's designing the algorithm and also implementing it. There's a team that's totally responsible for the hardware, and there's a team that's only responsible for the design, and these are three separate teams. They could be other AI startup. For example, they could be a startup that's using AI in an interesting way. Let's say they're making investment agent driven and powered by artificial intelligence. That's much more of a marketing and a sales play once you have the core product done. But there too, I would say that the same philosophy holds true. Although I would say that there will be more people on the marketing side if you're using paid marketing or you're using social media to get customers. The structure still remains the same. Our second question is, what is good organizational structure for a startup? The keyword is functional teams or a functional organization where you have these separate structures and separate teams that I actually mentioned to you, which is hardware, software, services, artificial intelligence, applications, marketing, operations, sales, and so forth. So you have one that spans horizontally across the whole organization, not specifically for a feature. And yes, there could be other aspects that you may not need today. For example, if it's only a software-only solution, you may not have a hardware team. Or if you are not at a stage where you're selling the product, you may not have a sales team, or you may have one team that's responsible for sales and marketing. If the focus is really on the hardware engineering side, you have a team that's very much focused on hardware engineering. One suggestion though, and I believe that works very well for AI startups specifically, because AI is a tool. It's just like internet in 2000, where you need internet to build a web page or to make a web page alive. And the same thing here. AI is a tool that will power your application, that could power an aircraft, for example. The suggestion is to have the design team separate from the engineering team. So design would be a much more confined team where you have one or two designers if you're small, which works with the CEO or the chief designer, for example. Yes, some of the feedback will come from everyone else in the team as well, because you're a startup, you're a small startup, but the design team should be separate. The same goes for the artificial intelligence part of it, that you want to have a clear boundary between AI, because their role, especially if you're building a deep tech AI product, to go as deep as possible in building the AI component, because that's your bread and butter. That's where the IP is. The third question is, how do you manage the recruiting process to onboard such a team? That's an excellent question, because when people apply and also when we post a job, the idea is that you will want to hire a product manager, or you will want to hire a project manager, or you'll be hiring an engineer or a software engineer, or you will be hiring somebody for sales and you'll be hiring somebody else for marketing. But first of all, you won't have the resources to hire one person for each profile. And secondly, that also doesn't fit very well with the functional team structure or the organization. That's why it becomes a little bit tricky for a startup to hire somebody. I've been hiring people for the last 15 years. I've been in technology for the last 30 years or so. I've been on the business development and sales side for the last 10, 15 years. One thing I've seen is it's a good idea to hire people who have a technology background. If you're hiring somebody for sales or marketing, it's a good idea to hire somebody who has that engineering background, in the sense that they understand the product very well. For example, if you're trying to build a social media platform, one person could be that they're very good in building web pages, but at the same time, Hiring an influencer or a social media influencer is a very good thing because he or she will know exactly what the other side is looking for. And that's where, as a startup founder or as a startup recruiter, you want to be strategic about what you want to hire. For example, at Robometrics Machine and Skive, I will not hire a specific product manager or a project manager. We don't have a role for product or a project manager. What we have is leads, and they lead everything about that specific feature or product. Everyone who is not doing engineering is in the marketing and sales side. They're also responsible for the operation side of things. And I believe that's one way to look at it, that when you're hiring somebody for the technology side, hire somebody who has multiple skills. For example, they could be really great on engineering, so hardware or software or both, or they are at least fair in some of the business sides of it. So for example, they have great communication skills. Because ultimately what will happen is that some of these people who are the experts in this area or who became experts in this area because they've been with you from the very start will be the one who will be talking to some of your biggest customers, will be talking to even your investors if you're looking for funding. So that's on the engineering side where you hire somebody for engineering, but you have that in the back of your mind that they should have really good communication skills. So you should look at that aspect when interviewing. The second bucket is everyone who is not coding is in that second bucket where they're doing marketing, they're doing communication, they're doing PR, they're doing operation, they're doing sales. Some of these aspects may not be relevant today, for example, sales, but other may be. So when you're posting a job for something like this, have that in your mind. How can you be creative in having a little bit of a broader job description? So instead of saying marketing, you can say business development and marketing. Or if you're hiring somebody for operations, just don't say operations, say sales and operations or operations and marketing. That's why you want to be creative. And that also makes sure that as you grow, you could still evolve that functional organizational structure. These are the 3 questions so far. If you have more, please feel free to reach out. I'm really available on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. And we will focus on something interesting next week. So stay tuned. Look out for an invitation on our Facebook page, on our LinkedIn page. Thanks, and I will see you next week.